Okay. Alrighty, I'm getting better at this. I don't second guess it so much. I know that I'm live. Okay, so I'm really, really excited to talk about today's subject. It represents a really intense passion of mine that I struggled with kind of coming into for a while in the spiritual sense because it felt a little vain and superficial and shallow. But beauty is so much more than just those things alone. It has this deep, powerful, alchemical gnosis to it. And I struggled a lot in relationship to that really profoundly because of the shame that I carried and the shame that we carry in our body, how that influences our physical beauty. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And yet, that's what we're going to get into today because it's a great place to start looking at where you may not be allowing yourself to shine in this much more alive sense that is possible for you because of the shame that you're carrying. And a lot of times what happens is we get stuck in these feedback loops where we're stuck in the shame, we're stuck in the contraction. And because of that, we're seeing the reflection of that, we're feeling that, we're living that, and we kind of get really locked in that as a box, not realizing the kind of multi-dimensional potentiality of our beauty and its really far stretching capacity. We are kind of brought into this world believing that physical appearance is just a matter of the specific set of characteristics and attributes that we were handed by virtue of this genetic lottery that, configured us in this very particular way. And we kind of resign to that in a really, really unhealthy way, not realizing how deeply influenced by environment, upbringing, identity, and very subtle pieces that beauty is shaped through. Yes, there are people who just maintain that kind of purity just innately, physically, but there's a lot of space and stretch in between the tiers of beauty that we don't realize is ours for the taking and ours to kind of like grow and expand through. And it's not just a physical process. There's a very kind of deep internal sentience to the nature of beauty and what beauty represents, and our role in broadcasting that beauty it's all a part of this kind of bigger picture of what it means to be beautiful. And we're just going to kind of get into it because I could really talk about this so long, and I will be talking about this so long because beauty is a deep passion spiritually of mine that I have battled with very much so. Oh, we got a person coming in. Yay, that's so exciting. Yay, Cassie's coming in. Okay, but beauty is ultimately a path that I've really deeply struggled to understand and integrate and come to wholeness in relationship to. And through that, though, I have a lot of deeper kind of, oh, how do I change this? Deeper understanding of, hold on one second, I'm troubleshooting. Okay, okie dokie. I think I got it. No, I don't. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. But oh, it's so good to have you here, Cassie. Yeah, it's really something I've immensely struggled with in understanding and coming into a healthy kind of integral place with without sacrificing myself, without kind of giving power to the greater collective. But through that, I've really come into a lot of deeper intelligence in relationship to the kind of malleability of beauty and it being more like this active living possibility and organism than this kind of fixed thing that we're assigned in this really harsh kind of like cruel way in life. There's so much space to evolve like a butterfly and decompose and be reborn through these channels. Part of my experience growing up with so much shame, growing up with a lot of pain around my identity, where I belonged, how I fit into the greater world at large, and just feeling like an outcast. I carried so much shame that kind of kept me stuck in this really paralyzed place, this contracted place. And I felt really, really chained to that because I knew on a much deeper level there was something more to me living inside of me that I just didn't know how to access, and I didn't know how to anchor it. And yet, like, my body was kind of at the mercy of the, again, broader cultural conditioning of this is what beauty is. And it gave it so much power. But it was through the act of dance, actually, that I initially first severed my allegiance to that false reality. It was through dance where I kind of touched what was more the multidimensional sentience of beauty in a really meaningful way, because all of a sudden I didn't feel so small anymore. I felt like I had something really magical inside of me that was expressing itself through my body. And it was actually the gateway to me being like, I am more than this box that I put in. I feel it, so obviously I have to pursue it. And it was what sparked that channel for me to not surrender to what my life was telling me was real and true and fixed in this really harsh sense. So in that discovery, I kind of walked this mystery path of the body and understanding what it takes to emit radiance and this transcendent level, but not only just emit it, become it, embody it, and hold it. And the deeper kind of piece of shame and how it connects to that is shame is more than just a feeling. Shame, it becomes this kind of paralyzing identity that actually works its way like a poison into the entire physicality of the body as a vessel. And it creates this natural state of contraction in the face, in the muscles, in the posture, in the fascia of the body. We store that shame, and it morphs us into a much smaller, less beautiful version of ourselves than we actually are. And because it's so hard to see through with all of the greater cultural conditioning, see through the fixed rigidness of beauty, it's easy to give that a lot of power. It's easy to get really, really stuck inside of that territory and domain because we think it becomes like this just self-fulfilling prophecy. The more we fall into shame, the more shame kind of physically reflects itself back to us in our actual appearance. And the more we kind of surrender to that appearance as fixed, which further catapults us and propels us into these deeper pockets of shame. And then we end up at a certain place in our life where we're surrounded by things that don't honor us, and they don't acknowledge us, they don't see our beauty, and we're so used to it. We've just become completely accustomed to it because, again, that self-fulfilling prophecy is deep in effect. It's deep in the bones of your body. And truly breaking these chains, it's about understanding that, you know, we tend to ascribe the idea of even the mystery paths alone, like we tend to see them as these kind of mental, externalized places we have to arrive to. We don't realize those same mystery paths actually exist inside of our body. That same divine intelligence actually exists inside of our body, and we can develop an active relationship with that path. Does it mean that we're just gonna like wake up one day and be like, I believe I am this, so I am? No, it's just like any other path to enlightenment. We have to walk through these fires and these trials and tribulations to get to a place where we can actually manifest the results of that process. And you never want to approach it in that way, though, in that transactional sense of I'm literally just only doing these things that I'm doing these practices, I'm doing these rituals, I'm doing these explorations because I'm desperately trying to create a result. We can start there. That's where I started. I definitely started from this place of like, I feel a dire hunger for beauty in my identity because this surrounding space does not see or honor me in that. So how can I do this? There has to be something. And I started in that place. So naturally, because I started in that place, all that I touched was surface level manifestations of that process. So things like hypnosis and things like affirmations and things like just look at yourself in the mirror and believe you're beautiful. And all of those surface level things come from transactional ideologies. They come from a place of, I need to get something from this. So I'm going to treat this like a Band-Aid solution that I'm just going to slap on and hope it works because I'm not actually committed to the actual transformation that needs to happen in order for me to become the person I desire to be. And that's really where I ended up. But it took me a while because I was so, we enter those spaces because we're really hungry for something to soothe the pain. And yet they are like gateway drugs into the actual truth of the path, which is good. We have to start somewhere, right? So I started, like I said, in that kind of like shallow waters of beauty and understanding what it means to embody beauty and hold a higher dimensional beauty. And through those waters, eventually made my way out into the ocean of the path itself, which is ultimately about creating this kind of like physical alignment in your vessel with this higher divine identity that you carry, the more evolved spiritual nature, the goddess or God inside of you. What do they want to look like? Surely it's not this contracted, afraid, nervous creature that is like carrying so much heaviness and tension and like contracted and small and afraid and anxious and ashamed. Surely it's not that. So why would we, compartmentalize that divine identity and be like, it can only exist over here in maybe it's my work, in my career, maybe it's in my tangible money manifestations, but it's most definitely not in my body, in my actual physical expression, because it takes, again, a lot of deconditioning to even understand that as a truth, as a possibility. And it's not an easy place to get to, I will tell you that. But I'm here to share with you some of the things I've learned through this process and the pain of this process, and tell you that it's a lot more malleable than you may believe. Even when it comes down to the nature of the face, and for example, the idea of aging and all of these things that come into the skin health and things like that, it's actually much more complex than this is just our trajectory, this is just our genetics. The face is a complex emoting vehicle that carries the imprints of our designated emotional states. If you carry shame, if you carry despair, if you carry sadness, if you carry rage, if you carry judgment for a prolonged period of time as a habituated state of being, your face is going to eventually morph to reflect that, because these emotions aren't just emotions. Emotions are also physical manifestations. Like, for example, when you're angry and you clench down on your jaw, and when you're sad and you're kind of like down turning your lips, when you're really confused and you're furrowing your brows, it's all physical. Even though there is an actual internal feeling state attached to it, there's also a physical imprint, and that physical imprint compounds over time to eventually kind of leave this default setting of who you think you are, but it's not actually who you are. It's just the kind of compounding physical effect of your facial, emotional, somatic identity. And this is where it's like it really is this beautiful, mysterious unraveling of all the deeper programming we have around the idea of the physical body, and the idea of it being this like fixed vehicle thing that we just walk into. I feel this. I always thought wearing braces for 4 years did some irreversible damage. Yeah, exactly. There's all of these things that can happen when it comes to the development of the structure of the face, the musculature in our face, in our body. Even when you think about like the neck and the shoulders, it actually connects to the face as well, because we have these muscles rising up, and depending on how tense these are, if we're carrying this burden, if we're carrying this shame, if we're carrying this like contraction, it's going to affect the face. It reaches through and creates these patterns and these habituated states that end up determining what we see in the mirror. But it's not as fixed as this is just what it is, because we have to find ways of breaking that feedback loop and getting into this place where we can kind of understand that even though we feel helpless to this to a certain degree, there's actually a lot of communion we can create with the body and with our relationship to the body, where we're being in this relationship where we're trying to understand its intelligence, its guidance, its messaging. It can tell you where something is wrong. You can either surrender to the broader kind of medical, pharmaceutical, cosmetic industry and give them all your money and give them all your fear and pain. I tried to walk that road. It's not a healthy road. It takes you nowhere but deeper into your shame and pain. Or you can kind of return to this natural intelligence that's able to guide and instruct you in a much different way and actually pull you back into your center of command as a being, as a physical being, and as a being of nature. And what that means for the broader world at large. Even I've said this before in one of my beauty alchemy journeys, but if you look at the difference in the structure of American faces modern times versus like old Hollywood times, if you just look at the modern stars versus the old Hollywood stars, there's a difference in the structure of their face that's not just like an anomaly. It's an actual consistent difference in the nature of how they appear and how they show up on camera. It's not just to do with the filming style. It's not just to do with the cameras. It's a very marked structural difference that had to do with a different time and a different culture and what that meant for who they identified as and what that ended up shaping of them, how that ended up informing and influencing what they ended up, becoming. And it's so subtle. It's so subtle. You almost can't catch it sometimes because it's so subtle. But that's why it's really good to begin to shift our relationship to the body in this way where we're opening to the deeper sentience. Because if we don't listen, we can't hear. And again, when we can't hear, we feel helpless. When we feel helpless, we give a lot of power to the industries that are preying on our insecurities. And we think, okay, I have nothing else to do because I want to be beautiful. And I'm fighting this urge because it feels vain, it feels shallow, but on a higher spiritual level, it's not at all. You want integrity between the higher identity you carry and the physical vessel you exist inside of. That's not something that's shallow for you to ask for. It's about the evolution of that process and what that means for how much of your power you're able to hold and stand in this world. It's not shallow. It is shallow, but it's not, because it connects to a much deeper body of energy and consciousness and memory and presence than what our world is currently defined and designated. So often women cut themselves off from this quest because if they're in the spiritual world, if they're in the spiritual realm where they're even sensitive enough to these truths, they're usually in a place where they're resisting the idea of beauty. They're resisting the control of the industries that have so much power around beauty. They're resisting that sense of and they're rebelling against that sense of that desire inside of them, even though it's very real, it's very true. They resist it and they rebel because on some level it seems minuscule in comparison to building an empire and getting your brands out there and showing up for your evolution spiritually and reaching nirvana and all of those things that we kind of place much higher on the spiritual totem pole. But the truth is, beauty is deeply a deep sustenance, a deep nourishment to the soul that is not something you want to neglect or ignore. Because if you do, yes, you can find peace in ignoring it. Yes, you aren't a slave to it. Yes, all of those things are true. But when you realize that you don't have to resign to that, you actually have freedom to kind of dance in the whimsy of self-creation and choosing who you want to stand as and emanate as, then why won't you? And why won't you? And maybe because it requires investment of time and intimacy, and it does. This path is a path. It's not something you just, like I said, can affirm or meditate your way into. You really have to develop a relationship with your body that allows you to receive the instruction through and underneath the shame and the pain of feeling like things are fixed, feeling like you're powerless, feeling like oh, it's so good to see your lovely face. Yeah, but we have to push through the idea that we're powerless, which is often filled with a ton of emotional weight around who we think we are and how that identity has kind of kept us imprisoned for a very long time and kept us in a space of pain and lack of awareness. And so when you're initially breaking these barriers with your body, it can feel really hellish because oops, I'm shaking my table. It can feel really hellish because you're coming in touch with the deep perceived helplessness that has been seeded by the greater world at large. And that's really, really scary at times to kind of allow yourself to open to. It's filled with a lot of grief. It's filled with a lot of despair. And within that, though, you have to understand there's a deeper neutrality to the body that you can find and come into. And that's where you want to be, because that's where you have the most creative potential to kind of open to the higher planes of your beauty. It's the same thing with like wealth and business. If you're coming at it from this really desperate hunger, you're most likely not going to experience flow. If you're coming at it from this place of neutrality and peace and whatever the outcome, you're going to find the solution. It's the same with the body, but because the body is so riddled with this deep just worthlessness often that's seeded into our idea of what the body stands for, and the body as sin, the body as this animal thing that we have to conquer and fix and prod and poke and dishonor. It's really hard to penetrate that illusion sometimes, but know that it's possible and know that there is so much room for you to kind of have a say in the creative manifestation of your physical experience and your physical beauty. And within that, it gets to be so much more, there gets to be so much more kind of essence anchored to your life and to your experience of your life that wouldn't have been there if you weren't fully expressed like that. And yeah, do you have any questions, Cassie, or anything you want to add or share? No, you're good? Okay, good. I'm going to check to see if there's any on Facebook. I always have a hard time looking at both at once. Oh God, yeah, that's exactly what okay, so yeah, this was my intro into this. We're going to kind of go deeper into these spaces in my upcoming live streams. It's going to be like a little fun thing I do every couple of days. Please join. I love it. I love you being here. I love the energy. And yeah, the contraction, it's huge. It's so profound how habituated it can become to our body and how much of that ends up kind of like being this downward spiral in every single area that's so hard to kind of climb and pull ourselves back out of because of the actual affirmation it provides in the physical world, this sensation of like being it, seeing it, meeting it, and how heavy that weight can be. But we have to understand it's a much deeper, there's a much deeper consciousness underneath that we have to bring ourselves back to. And this is really what the journey is about, is restoring that purity of self that is the center point of all of this creative beauty that wants to be born through your vessel. And it's deeply rewarding. It can be scary as hell sometimes to navigate the primal realm in this way because of how much stakes live inside of this dimension. But there's so much it has the space to offer you once you can kind of like reverse out of the contraction into the expansion, into the peace and the trust and the holding. That feels really, really, really good. So yeah, this was my journey today. I'm so glad you could come and be here with me. And yeah, I'll have more coming. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, see you guys soon. Bye, lovely. Thank you for being here.